Well, everyone, let's talk about another MacBook that I think if there's one MacBook that I know the most about, it is pretty much these specific MacBooks, the 2015 Retina MacBook Pros. Now, what I can tell you about these MacBooks is that they are such solid MacBooks in so many different ways, and I think as a public consensus, every time I go on Reddit, my comment sections or whatever for any type of these, specific MacBooks, I wouldn't say everybody, like a ton of people mention the 2015 Retina MacBook Pros as being the latest and greatest MacBooks that Apple has ever made. I think the M1 MacBooks have kind of taken that place, but when you think of a MacBook that Apple just threw everything that they had in, these are probably the MacBooks. Now, there were two different models, the 13-inch model and then the 15-inch models. And then from those models, there were a ton of other, variants you can choose from. But I was somebody that I actually owned both as my main MacBook, and I literally was using this MacBook for everything on the go up until the M1 MacBooks came out. So pretty much like 3 months ago, that's when I fully transitioned over to the M1 MacBooks. And I can tell you, from going from a 2015 MacBook to an M1 MacBook Pro, I honestly, there's definitely some improvements, there's some changes, it's probably faster, but day-to-day tasks, I really don't see them being super different. The main difference I see is exporting in Final Cut Pro. Other than that, the 2015 MacBook is still completely relevant in my opinion. Now, like I mentioned, I bought two different models. I had the 13-inch model and the 15-inch model, and I definitely did like the 13-inch model for the portability, but the 15-inch model was definitely a better MacBook, I think. But when I bought my 16-inch MacBook and I compared it to the 15-inch, I was able to see that the 15-inch does look a bit dated. There's quite a big bezels on it. I'm not a huge fan of the bezels, but the screen itself, the display, is really, really good, and I didn't see that big of a difference even now from my 2015 MacBook to my M1 MacBook that I own now. So there really wasn't that big of a difference. These displays are still extremely beautiful. Now, closed, these MacBooks do have the Apple logo that glows, so that's a really cool thing. I actually did like that a lot, and that's something that's so funny to me that MacBooks don't have it anymore. Now, when you open it, obviously you're displayed with that 15-inch MacBook or that 13-inch model. These displays are still really good, as I mentioned before, and they're such high resolution that I don't see these panels being bad anytime soon. I still own my 2012 MacBook, my Retina one, and that thing still looks beautiful as well. Now, you do have that full-size keyboard, no butterfly keyboards or anything like that, and these keyboards are still extremely strong. They still click in place. They're all so beautiful still, and that's my biggest problem. That's why I had kind of a big problem with my 2016 up until about the 2019 MacBooks. I just didn't like those keyboards. They were very flat. These MacBooks with these keyboards were awesome. Now, you do have that, trackpad on the bottom, multi-touch, all that good stuff. It can do everything pretty much the M1 MacBook trackpads can do, so there really isn't that big of a difference there. But as I mentioned before, day-to-day tasks, your keyboard and your trackpad are things you're going to be using on a daily basis. And I really do like these keyboards. I use a touch bar, I guess, nowadays because I have to, but I wouldn't go from a touch bar to a non-touch bar or vice versa. It's the same thing. Now, on the sides, this is where the biggest differences are from everything that I've seen. So first of all, on the left side of the MacBook, you can see we have that MagSafe capability, which I love. I love having that type of stuff. You have two Thunderbolt 2 ports, which this allows you to connect to displays and to hubs and stuff like that, which is great. So you have two of those ports. On top of that, you have that USB 3 port, which is crazy. I mean, I love USB 3. I like USB-C more, but again, I like having that capability of having that port there if I need it. And then you also have that headphone jack. Now, on the other side, you have that USB 3, another port of that. You have a full HDMI cord or full HDMI port, which is insane to me that this thing has it. But on top of that, the most important thing that this MacBook has that I wish Apple apparently is bringing back from some rumors is that micro SD or that standard SD card slot. This is something that if I could just, this is the only reason I use a dongle. The only reason I use a dongle for my MacBook is literally just for the SD card. All my other peripherals I've already changed, for my mics to really anything else. If I have to charge or connect my iPhone to my MacBook, I already have a USB cable to do that. There is no USB cable that just plugs into my camera I can just, store everything on my, MacBook. My cameras don't have that capability. Some cameras do from what I've seen, but my camera doesn't, so I still have to rely on a, SD card, and it's so annoying to bring out a dongle, bring it back, and that's why every single time, the main reason I would even upgrade to any of the new MacBooks is to have an SD card. I don't care if the new MacBooks are X amount faster, or have better displays, or, better battery life. These M1 MacBooks are so crazy. But the one thing I miss the most about my older MacBooks is that SD card. So take it as you will, but that is like the number one thing that I wish if Apple could bring back. It is that, and the 2015 MacBooks have that capability. So in terms of the outside and the body, these MacBooks still hold up extremely well. They still have, beautiful displays. They still have beautiful port selections. The keyboards are fine, and everything about that aspect is still completely good in my opinion. Now, on top of that, one thing that I didn't actually know was that there are still some things that you can go and modify on these 2015 MacBooks. I was kind of brought up that, for the 2012 MacBook Pro, the non-Retina ones, you could change up so much stuff in that. You can change the hard drive out to an SSD and take out the CD slot and put in some more memory and all that stuff. And so I was always jealous of that. But there are still some things you can actually go and modify on your specific, MacBooks. And in this case, I think when I bought my 2015 MacBook Pro, what I actually ended up buying was, I believe, a 256 gig model. I basically bought the base model MacBook Retina Pro that I could buy, and eventually, I eventually traded. And then what I did after that was I bought the 8 gig 13-inch 2015. I switched that up to a 16 gig, I believe. That was also 2015. And then I went and bought that 15-inch one, and that was essentially a pretty big upgrade. I went from a 16 gig 13-inch to a 16 gig 15-inch, and that was great. But I was running out of storage constantly, and I found out that you can actually go ahead and change up and, increase your storage on your MacBook if you had a 2015 one. And I was so confused because I thought you couldn't. But I ended up buying the SSD, and I ended up I'm not that great at, taking apart technology. I've never, taken apart a MacBook before, but literally all I had to do was follow a tutorial I saw online. I literally just unscrewed the back plate, took out that memory. I had to take out some screws and then just place that new memory in it. And that was it. Now I automatically quadrupled my storage, and it really made me stop upgrading and stopped me from upgrading to a 16-inch MacBook. I literally bought the 16-inch MacBook. I was going to use it on a daily basis, but I found out that, there wasn't really that big of a difference, and the fans on the 16-inch MacBook were going on all the time, and it was so annoying. However, on my 15-inch MacBook, I found out that, I can increase the storage and save myself like thousands of dollars, so I ended up doing that. So that's another big thing you have the capability of doing for a 2015 MacBook that you don't necessarily have like on a M1 MacBook, on any of the other 2016 onward MacBooks either. So that is another pretty big thing to keep in mind. Now, finally, I do want to hit on the performance. This performance on these MacBooks are still relevant in my opinion. First of all, software updates, these things, with the software improvements of Big Sur and stuff have really only helped it. I didn't really see that big of a, speed decrease going from Mac OS Mojave to Mac OS Big Sur. It was a big change in my opinion, but I pretty much saw the same type of speeds. The big thing though to keep in mind is that you're getting still a really good processor. You're getting the Intel i7 on some models, and I think some models have a, higher chipset inside of it. Don't quote me on that. But obviously you can go from, the 2.2 gigahertz on the 13-inch ones to 2.5 gigahertz with quad core on the, 15-inch ones. So I think that's a pretty big, increase as well. And I do think on top of that, when you consider both models, these are solid performing MacBooks still. I don't really see that big of a difference. Now, for that long amount of time that I had this MacBook, for about a year and a half, I was editing all my videos on this MacBook. I was literally doing every single thing. I had an iMac as well, but even my iMac was like a 2015 iMac. So it's not like I was using the latest and greatest like I am now. I was literally editing so many videos a day. I was, writing out papers. I was doing so much stuff day after day after day. And these MacBooks were able to handle it perfectly fine. I didn't really see that big of a difference going from a 2015 MacBook to a M1 MacBook in all sense. I do see pretty much a bigger change in battery life. I think, the fan's not going up as much all the time. And I do think on top of that, the battery life is better, like I mentioned, but export times are so much better on the M1 MacBook. But for every single other purpose, I think the, 2015 MacBook is still a pretty relevant, MacBook for sure. And if I were you, if I was looking for a MacBook, let's just say I had like a, iPad, or if I didn't even have a laptop yet, I would be happy with the 2015 MacBook Pro. I wouldn't consider myself like a super heavy use case, but I edit a lot of videos, as most of you know. I chop up a lot of videos. I have to keep uploading them. And to be honest, the 2015 MacBook was able to handle it perfectly fine. I didn't really run into too many issues. My only complaint sometimes was that the fans would ramp up. That was The only kind of annoying thing that really bothered me sometimes, but the battery life was great. Everything I wanted to do with it worked perfectly fine. Very rarely did it crash on me. I even was able to, dual boot it into a Windows machine as well for some things that I wanted to do with it. And even on that side of things, it handled it perfectly fine. There were very few issues that I had with that sense too. So I think as a whole, this MacBook is still a very good MacBook for so many different reasons. I think it's a solid, pickup if you want just something to kind of leave around the house. If you don't want to bring your iMac with you everywhere, you can bring this 2015 MacBook and still get a lot of capability. This thing's battery life was pretty good. It's definitely nothing to brag about nowadays, but the performance and the overall package with the port selection and for the price that you're going to pay for it is actually a solid thing in my opinion. And it's still going to get software support probably for a couple more years, so you're in good company in there too. So I think in terms of that, this MacBook is still completely worth it, and I think it's a solid pickup in 2021. So if you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.